Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Bob Manwaring. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Arvada. And we have a meeting here tonight. It's a two-part meeting, actually. The first part, we're going to cover the National Environmental Protection Agency Act requirements for replacement of a parking garage behind the landmark movie theater. And heading up that will be Kevin Flynn with RTD and Liz Talbert. The second part of the meeting will be the requirement that the city has for needing to change the zoning on that same property. So there'll be the first part on the NEPA process, and the second part, which is required by city ordinance, to have a meeting to change the zoning, the public. So I'm going to turn this over to Kevin Flynn, and he'll take it from there. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Flynn. I'm the Public Information Manager for RTD on this project. We call it the Eagle Project. It consists not only of the Gold Line, but also the East Rail Line we're building out to the airport and Northwest Rail up to Westminster. So it's called Eagle for East and Gold Line Enterprise. A little trivia for you. We do have a sign-in sheet out there, and I actually ran out of space on one, so I put a blank piece of paper out. We would like to sign in at least with my name, and if you want to give us your phone number and email, then we can put you on our mailing list. If you already got an email about this meeting, then we already have you on our mailing list, but we would like to document that you're here. I didn't bring enough because I forgot that we're coming to Arvada. And I have to tell
People
you,
show up.
I have to tell you,
Great.
sometimes we struggle to get people engaged and come out and give us their comments and their opinions. We have never had that problem up here in Arvada. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wherever you fall on the issues, you are always here and you always give us your opinion. We really value that. We do have comment sheets on the round table where you came in if you don't want to speak or give us a verbal comment tonight. We have sheets out there that you can filter out during the presentation and write out, just leave them for us. And if you want to speak or ask a question verbally at the end of this, what will happen is I will jot down. I used to be a reporter at the Rocky Mountain News, so I'm used to taking notes real quick. So I'll take notes on what you say. If Liz Telford can answer it here, she will. If it's an answer that requires more research, it'll become part of our documentation for the NEPA process. But that's what we'll do with your verbal comments. With that, I want to turn over the meeting to Liz Telford, who you are very fortunate to have Liz here because she has been on this Gold Line since, I think, Lewis Ralston.
Ever. When they discovered gold. Thanks. I have this one. Is this on? Is it working? Okay, you can hear me? Yes, I have been on this project forever, and I love that because you rarely get to see a project all the way from the planning stages, when people were trying to determine where the line's going to go, where the stations are going to go, what kind of trains we're going to use, all the way from that into construction where we are now, and I hope to ride the first train. And if they don't let me ride the first train, I'm going to be really, really upset. But I started off at the Regional Transportation District in the late 90s and actually did a lot of the technical work on the Gold Line. How many people are going to ride the train and how frequently should we offer service and all those kinds of things. And then I came back to RTD when Fast Tracks passed because I wanted to help move Fast Tracks along and particularly go back and work on the Gold Line and see it to the end. So I became the Fast Tracks Environmental Manager. I oversee all the environmental work on all the projects, but I also became the project manager of the environmental impact statement for the Gold Line, which started in 2006 and we finished up in 2009. Can I have the next slide? What's the purpose of this meeting? We finished up the environmental work. Why am I talking to you about more environmental work? Well, I want to talk to you about what's called the environmental reevaluation process, which we're kicking off tonight, which is why we have the meeting, so you can be involved in the process with us. I want to provide information to you about some of the proposed changes to the transit station area. We're not talking about changes of the actual platform or canopy or changes in the alignment. We're talking about reconfiguration of the station area. And we want to identify your opportunities to comment on these changes to us. So what is an environmental reevaluation? Well, once we finish that environmental impact statement process, which we did in November of 2009, sometimes things change. People want things to be a little bit different. Some different finances come to the table. Other things happen, and people say, we'd really like to do that station a little bit differently. Or we really don't like the canopy at our station that we got approved in the environmental impact statement. And we say, okay, we'll have to take a look at that, because what's been approved and funded is what is in that final environmental impact statement. So in this case, the city of Arvada and others were interested in reconfiguring where things were in the Old Town Station area. One of the biggest goals was to provide structured parking opening day. And I'll show you what the plans were during the EIS, but it wasn't to have structured parking opening day. So the goal of Arvada and others has always been, let's do that earlier in the process. And so that was one of the requests. RTD and the Federal Transit Administration, who's also funding part of this project, we have to evaluate the proposed change. We have to look at the effects of that. We have to look at the environmental effects of that. And if there are no significant effects that are found, then the Federal Transit Administration can approve these changes. And that then becomes part of the approved project. So we're in the process right now. I have an environmental team that includes historians, biologists, wetlands people, land use people. We're in the process right now of going through all of those environmental resource areas that we looked at during the EIS and evaluating this proposed change against all those resources. We'll write a document that talks about our findings. You'll be able to make comments in this meeting, on our website, on that draft document before it becomes final. And we'll make the document available on the website in draft form before it's final in the March-April timeframe when we complete our evaluation. So we're just kicking it off tonight. So what is the Gold Line project that was approved in the environmental impact statement? Going from Denver Union Station out to Ward Road along the UP and BNSF alignment on the north side of the tracks generally. We have 7 stations, 41st East Station it's called in Denver, the Pecos Station in Adams County, the Federal Station in Adams County, the Sheridan Station, Adams County, Arvada, the Old Town Station that we're talking about tonight, the Arvada Ridge Station at Kipling, and the Ward Road Station out just east of Ward Road. So those are the stations that have been approved, as well as a commuter rail maintenance facility where all the commuter rail vehicles of our system will be maintained just north of the 41st and Fox Station, partially in Denver, partially in Adams County. So what did we propose during the EIS for the Old Town Station area? You can see in orange where the station platform is. That's not changing. You can see where the plaza area is just to the east of the platform. You can see that we had our parking proposed 400 spaces opening day on the east side of Vance where our existing park and ride is. And we were going to expand that some to the south. We were going to reconfigure, there's a bus loop in there today. Instead of having that loop, we were going to build 56 through and have our buses stop on 56. And that would give us enough room on that footprint for those 400 spaces. So that's what we were going to do opening day at the Old Town Station. We planned then in 2030 to build a structure on that site. And it's often the goals of local governments and others to not have seas of parking. We want to put parking as much as we can in as small of a space as we can. And so our financial plan allowed us to do that, but only allowed us to do that by 2030. So the plan was 400 surface spaces, opening day, and a structured parking in 2030. Can you go back one slide? I forgot to mention something. We had some comments during the EIS on the surface parking option. And if you think about it, people are getting dropped off on the buses at 56, they're parking down there, and then they're walking at 8% grade up Vance to go over the railroad tracks to the platform. That's pretty significant, and we had a lot of comments about people saying, that's not real accessible. What are you gonna do about this? We scratched our heads and we said, well, what we'll do about this is we'll build an elevator in the corner of the surface parking opening day and a little bridge across. So when you park or get dropped off, you can take the elevator up and you're at the railroad grade. That was a compromise. Was it perfect? No, but it was a response to the comments about, gee, we're walking 8% grade up to get to this station. We don't really like it too much. Okay. So moving into the structure in 2030 was the plan at that time. Here is the proposed new location of the structured parking and the bus facility. So instead of being on the east side of Vance, the proposal is to be on the west side of Vance, between the rail alignment and the movie theater, right in that section of property. This is a little more detailed graphic of what's being proposed, but there would be a right-in of Old Wadsworth into the parking structure. The buses would circulate on the lower level there, and then there would be a right out for the buses that would continue either on 56 or go south to 55th or 53rd. So there'd be many more bus options in terms of how to access the facility. There would be, the proposal is for, again, obviously a parking structure, so you're gonna have the elevator, just like you did on the other side, but now it's on the west side. And there's also a proposal here for a pedestrian bridge that goes from the parking structure over and across the railroad tracks down into the plaza area. And that solves some of those comments about that grade difference there. Okay. So here's a summary of the proposed changes that we're asking for your questions and comments about. The first is the change from the surface parking, opening day, moving the structured parking up to opening day instead of waiting 15 years to do that. The change from the parking being located on the east side of Vance to the west side of Vance. The change in the location of the bus drop-off area from right on 56 to now within the parking structure, and the addition of the pedestrian structure from the parking structure to the transit plaza. So those are the changes we're asking for your comments on. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple of tables of some of the resources that we look at during the EIS process, and things that we are studying more and things that we already have a preliminary feel about, but all of this is still open for comment. You see on the left are the resources, and those are all the things that you find in the environmental impact statement document. And on the right side, do we have an impact? Do we not? Again, there's a question mark. We're doing the evaluation. We look at social impacts, land use, land acquisition. Two things that are highlighted on this slide are important. Those are things that we're evaluating very closely. Those are things that the Federal Transit Administration said we want to be sure that there aren't significant impacts. So we're looking at historic, archaeological, and cultural resources. Obviously, we have 5 historic districts in the area. We have to look at, does any of the reconfiguration of this station area impact our cultural resources, directly or indirectly? We're looking at visual and aesthetics qualities. Obviously, there'd be somewhat of a visual change to this. You will see the pedestrian structure, the parking structures being designed so as not to impact that view plane. But you will see some visual changes out there. So what we do is we take pictures from different locations. We do visual simulations. We have landscape architects and historians look at the change. and do their evaluation of whether they think that's a significant change or not a significant change. We don't have parks right on the footprint. There won't be any air quality changes because there's not going to be any additional parking spaces. There are going to be 400 cars there before, there's going to be 400 cars there after. And overall, transit generally improves air quality. Next slide. I want to point out that one of the mitigations for noise and vibration for this corridor is the quiet zone. I think I just heard a train horn. I think I just heard it. Did you feel the vibration? How many of you know what a quiet zone is? A lot of you, okay. But what you have to, the Federal Railroad Administration allows you to put in an application to get rid of those horns, both from the freight trains and from the commuter trains, if you improve safety along the corridor. So what we've done is all the grade crossings, and you're going to see all this construction, we've improved all those grade crossings. We've gotten them approved by the Public Utility Commission, all of them. We put an application, we're going to put together the application in Arvada. The city has to apply, but as long as we meet a safety risk factor, they can't turn you down. And we've improved them all enough to meet that safety risk factor. So I just wanted to say one more time, you're still going to get your quiet zone. Nothing about any of these potential changes to this station will impact that mitigation at all. We don't have any biological resources or farmlands or any safety or security concerns with this reconfiguration. Next, please. Transportation changes. We're not going to change anything about your rail service or bus service. We're going to have the same ridership. There won't be any regional traffic changes because the facility will be in a different location. There might be some local travel pattern differences. And so we're in the midst of a traffic study to evaluate that. So in conclusion, we think there are really 3 resource areas that need some more study, and we're focusing on that right now, and you might have other thoughts. But the historic resources, the aesthetic and visual resources, and the traffic patterns are things that we're putting additional study into right now, and that's sort of our assessment of what might be different about this proposed change. Okay. So here's how you can make comments at this meeting, and we'll have sort of a Q&A or comment period after I get done speaking. Written comments, we have comment cards out at that front table. If you'd like to put one on the comment card, we will have a website location here where you can pop on the website. If you think of something later and say, I want to make a comment there, we'll put it there. And both RTD and the Federal Transit Administration will consider your comments before making a final decision or approval. We work with the Federal Transit Administration, share all the comments, make responses to the comments, see if there's anything about the proposal we need to change or any mitigations we need to do, and we'll address that. So we will, before we're done, consider your comments. Kevin?
Do we have a time frame for the comments cut off?
We typically allow, once the draft document is out there for your review, 30 days. So you have time to read the document, read what our evaluation said, see if you agree or disagree, or you think we need to study something else, and then we typically have 30 days after it's posted. Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention a few other things. When Liz brought up construction, I went, oh my. I really want to thank you, citizens of Arvada, for your patience with our construction. It's getting very intense right now. This will be our peak year. Your inconvenience will last this year, and then it will be over. We'll go into testing. So I did want to mention that. I'm very grateful for the reactions we're getting from the citizens of Arvada. Those that have called us, we've been able to resolve, I think, most of their issues. And don't hesitate to call the project office. The information's on the website. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I know that we have some of our elected officials in here, but I wanted to start by introducing your director for the Regional Transportation District from the District L, which is Arvada, Director Lorraine Anderson, who I believe many of you probably have had the opportunity to meet. And I saw two of your city council members here, Councilman Marriott. Did I miss any of your colleagues? Are there any other council members here that I didn't see? Okay, so with that, thank you for attending. Liz, you want
Yeah,
people to address questions through here?
sure.
Okay.
Comments or questions? Oh, that's a big jump.
Yeah, I was just wondering how many people will that elevator hold?
How many people will the elevator hold? That's a really good question. I need an engineer to answer that. I can tell you that we typically build the elevators big enough so you can take your bike on it, because a lot of people like to do that. But I don't know. Do you know? 6 to 8 people, I'm being told, comfortably. Bill?
Just want to say, we're going to have 2 elevators in the parking structure going up to the bridge. So we're looking at 2 elevators.
So 6 to 8 times 2? Okay. Plus stairs, if you want some exercise. Okay. Which I think I'm going to get. I hope it goes this far.
I can speak loud.
Okay.
If the parking deck is to be ready by opening day in 2016, when does construction have to start so that the deck will be ready
Right.
on opening day?
Right. Not tomorrow, but soon. This summer. Typically what we do is we build, first we do all our grading, and then we do all our track work, and then we do our electrical, and the stations are kind of last, and the parking's last. The reason for that is we don't want it sitting around and not being maintained and not being used, and a lot of graffiti and that kind of thing happening. So this summer, soon.
I actually have 2 sets of questions. One of them is, when you build something like this, what is the life expectancy? How far in the future are you thinking? And my second part of that particular question has to do with, we are having a lot of changes that are starting now with our automotive infrastructure, cars, different type of fuels, different types of cars. So how flexible will a parking structure be for those future changes, some of which we know, some of which we do not know?
Okay, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know much about auto technology. You gotta remember, I work for a transit agency. I thought I could answer a train question, but car question's a little harder. I think, first of all, parking structure could be quite flexible because you can restripe, you can move bus facilities around, etc. We plan for our projects 20 years into the future. We're required by federal law to take a look 20 years into the future and that kind of thing. Now, we all know how good forecasts are 20 years into the future. So what we like to do with parking is we propose a parking number on opening day, and then we have committees at RTD, and we take monthly utilization reports of all our parking rides as to how full they are. And when they get to 80%, we start looking for money to expand. Do we have the money? How much should we expand? Because those 20-year forecasts are a little tough to get just right. So we try to forecast 20 years. We're required by law to do that, and then we monitor after opening day to see how full the structure is. Did that answer your question? Not really. Not really.
It's hard to monitor the lifespan of the system we're building. You also asked how long the system lasts?
Yes.
Typically 50 years, but then it doesn't go away. Then we just have to get new trains, we have to put new track in, but typically we build and it all lasts about 50 years. Yeah.
I think he was asking more along the lines of, would there be electrical outlets for electrical vehicles and that kind of thing?
Oh, is that what you were asking?
Well, it's part of the question. I have several questions.
Oh, okay. We have had discussions about electrical outlets and about station cars and those kinds of things. We have not, at the present time, come to a place where we found that that's going to be financially feasible right now. But of course, we can add and retrofit and those kinds of things, absolutely.
Are there any restrictions on the parking in the sense that I'm thinking of, like employees in the neighborhood or residents, for like overnight parking for residents and that kind of thing? Are there going to be any restrictions?
There would be restrictions. One of the restrictions is that the Federal Transit Administration requires us to set aside those 400 spaces for transit patrons. That being said, that isn't 24 hours a day. They're typically there in the morning to the evening. And so sometimes we've been in situations where we can do shared parking. So some of it's residences, some of it's transit patrons. But there are restrictions in terms of that. We have parking management policies also, and sometimes we do charge for parking. Like at Stapleton Park and Ride, we charge for overnight parking for in-district and out-of-district residents. So sometimes we have to manage our parking with some costs, but we haven't really gotten to the point of discussing that at this station. But we do know there'll be 400 spaces for transit patrons.
So the parking would not be available to shoppers in Old Town?
Oh, yes, there's additional spaces in the structure. I talked about the 400 spaces for the transit patrons because that's my piece of the project. But there's an additional 250 over the 400 for shoppers and for people who want to visit Old Town and shop in Old Town.
Okay, and
Yes.
what about, you talk about future expansion. What is to prevent you guys from going up with future expansion?
The grand views.
We won't go up because there's a grand view.
I'm aware of that.
Right.
20 years from now,
Gosh.
and you need the expansion, which way do you go? Because you can't, you're hemmed in by streets there. There is no room for expansion.
I can tell you what, a little bit from an RTD philosophy perspective, in 20 years, we would like lots more people walking to the station, lots more people busing to the station, and we'd rather not continue to build a sea of parking. And so, you know, we're trying to encourage other activities, thank you, other activities to get people to take the bus and walk and not expand and expand and expand.
So you don't have a plan for expansion at this time?
No.
Well, I can answer one of your questions. Bob Wilson, retired electrical engineer, 30 years in the power biz, and also on the Gold Line Committee here. I've checked with my local colleagues. And we're always looking, as you know, Arvada has a very robust sustainability policy. And we've been looking, with my background and interest in transit, friend Alan here, at putting in the infrastructure, recommending that the city, RTD, Trammell Crow, put in the infrastructure so that in the future, charging stands, electric vehicles charging stands can be installed. Basically, as Bill Lozier and I talked yesterday, this would be raceways, places you can put conduit in, talking
So
about.
that's been designed into it?
I'm hoping so, I believe so. And also, if you want to get down in the weeds, transformation from 480 to 240 volts, putting in enough capacity and enough to do that and be part of the sustainability policy of Jessica and the city work with. I see Mark hasn't stepped on my foot, our city manager. And also, just as a fact, the Regional Air Quality Council has funds you can apply for. And RTD just applied for 4 charging stations and 2 electric vehicle support, part of it. Regional air quality, to put in, if we have the infrastructure, put in the conduit later, you have the transformer capacity, they'll help with the electric vehicles. And I primarily say electric vehicles as opposed to natural gas. I think natural gas is more of a fleet operation maybe than RTD.
Bob, I think you have a question back there. Is that a question for Bob or me?
Well, one more fact is there's a bill in the legislature, SB Senate Bill 028, to even help out special districts, cities with more partial funding for charging stations, natural gas charging stations, a pot of money, which I know they have very good grant writers here, Mark's one of them, our city manager, to apply for them. So that's my little contribution. Pardon?
It'd be a great spot to put them.
It makes sense. and-
We have every intention of maximizing resources to put electric charging stations. And we can't point to a line item in the budget yet, but we have every intention of finding the funds to do exactly that.
As we work through the design, we're going to bump into the appropriate conduits, as Bob was trying to say, and as part of the garage design, we'll be able to accommodate that.
Back there.
I wanted to ask about the pedestrian bridge. I know that it's probably going to be the most visible aspect of the development. And the process that you took to get to the conclusion that that was what needed to go in as opposed to whatever other possibilities there might have been alternatives. And just
Okay.
can you walk us through your process so we understand?
Sure. Back during the EIS days, we looked at the pedestrian bridge. We looked at a tunnel option going under. Wow, that was really expensive. And you know, although we loved the idea and it was less visually intrusive, it just wasn't economically feasible. So we ruled out the tunnel option. You know, we came to that compromise with the elevator and the slight bridge, but then you still have to go across the railroad tracks, and there's still commuter and freight vehicles. So we're proposing the pedestrian structure, and we're taking a look at that as sort of the only other option we can think of at this point in time.
Thank you. Are you moving the railroad tracks that are there now?
Not in this location, no.
Is the bridge enclosed or is it will be open?
I think the proposal is that the bridge be open. I think I had a question.
I don't need that.
You don't need it.
And this is probably a question more for the city than it is for RTD, but we're already light on parking as it is in Old Town. What are you planning on doing when we lose the 250 spaces that we have right now where they're putting the structure?
Actually, we're not losing 200 spaces, we're losing about 150, if I remember
All right,
correctly.
well, either
But I
way,
mean, we're trying to accommodate the difference in the parking garage by adding 250 to the parking garage.
during construction, 15 months during construction, where are those people?
Right now, we're looking at different options for that, including expansion of the existing parking garage. The lot that's out here, the 1 acre lot that's just out front here, we're looking at putting parking on that for another 100 spaces. So we're finding different spots around the city to put parking, and I think we can accommodate that during construction.
That's,
Okay, thank you.
What kind of evidence did you have in coming up with your projection for 400 parking spaces? What did you know for sure, and what are you assuming?
Oh, that's a tough one, too. You're a tough question person. I think I'm going over here next. No. What we do is we take the Denver Regional Council of Governments forecast. They have a travel forecasting model, and they have inputs to that model that have population and employment forecasts. We have all this fancy-dancy software, and we run that model, and it tells us not only how many people we think are going to ride this line, which is anywhere from 11,000 up to 20,000 a day. We've gotten those kind of forecasts. But it also tells us where people are getting on and off the train. And it tells us what percentage of those people we think are going to walk, take the bus, or drive. So we take those boarding numbers at each station. We divide that in half because that's both sides of the trip. We take the percentage of who's going to walk, who's going to drive, and who's going to bus, and we apply that to the parking numbers with an auto occupancy of 1.2. And we say, okay, we think this is the amount of parking. I can tell you again, though, that we're really good at forecasting parking for the entire corridor. We're not so good at forecasting parking demands for each station. We're just not, and we'll just be frank about that. So what we did during this EIS that was different from other EISs is we phased the parking. We said we have a pretty good idea of who's parking there now. There's 200 spaces, they're full. We have a pretty good idea of what our projections say. We're gonna build that, and then we're gonna monitor. And that's why we're monitoring, because, again, we're good at corridor level projections. We're not always so good at site-specific ones. So we've gotta keep our eyes on it. Carol?
I have two questions. I'd like a clarification of where the light rail will be boarded. And also, are there going to be restrictions in the neighborhoods around for those wanting to walk so that we do not have parking all around our house forever?
Oh. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to defer the parking management question to the city because RTD doesn't do that in the neighborhoods, the cities do that. In terms of where people are boarding it, the platform is the same location that we had in the EIS. Can we go back to that graphic? That one. Go to my EIS one, that is a little easier to see, I think. So you can see the station platform where it is to the west of Vance, that orange label. It's still going to be right there with the canopy over it. There's some actual visual simulations in the EIS that show.
That's the theater right below, right?
That's the theater below, right? And I think just an interesting fact about these stations for electric multiple unit vehicles versus light rail is it's called level boarding. So our platforms are going to be a little bit higher. Our trains come right up to the platform, and you don't have to take any stairs to get on it. Not like our light rail, where you got to walk up those stairs and all that stuff. This is level boarding, so you can take your stroller or your suitcase or whatever and just walk right on.
Wheelchairs.
And wheelchairs. Bicycles. Absolutely, bicycles. So this level boarding thing for the commuter rail is pretty cool. It's going to be way easier to get on than our light rail is. Did you want to answer the part?
There's a couple of ways we can address the parking in the neighborhoods. If it becomes a problem, we'll probably do initially is just monitor it, see if people are trying to park there. Our hope is that with 650 spaces in this garage, it won't become a problem, plus it's right there by the platform. But if it does become a problem, we have a couple options. One is to restrict by time of day the parking in the neighborhood. So for example, maybe just 2-hour parking, which would impact most people in the neighborhood, because they're gone during the day or they have the driveways to park in. If that doesn't help, then what we can do is move to permit parking, which we don't want to really do because that causes problems for residents in some ways, because you have a permanent car, get a permit, then you get cited. So we'll try to start with the least restrictive and work our way up to the most restrictive if we have to. So that's a problem. But we'll have people out after opening day, we'll have folks out there monitoring the parking on the side streets and the neighborhoods and see what kind of parking we're getting from commuters. Okay.
Parking question.
Oh, over here.
Yes, I was curious, let's say that the ridership expands beyond your wildest dreams.
Yes.
Yes. And how can you increase, or by kind of like what percentage can you increase the capacity of the system by adding more cars, maybe running trains more frequently, and so on?
Okay.
Without adding more tracks.
Without adding more tracks, yes. I don't know if you all know, but in Old Town, because the right-of-way is so narrow, it's about 50 feet, we do have a section of single track in Old Town. And so so we didn't have to impact properties and all those kinds of things. So we had to do an evaluation of how much service could we provide with that restriction of that single track section. And one of our board members said, and Liz, I want you to make sure it's expandable. Wally Pulliam, I'll never forget him. Anyway, I said, of course it's expandable. We have built a system whereby we can make our platforms longer. We can add 2 more trains and double our capacity. And we're at 15-minute frequencies right now throughout the day. We can operate on that single track section at 7.5-minute frequencies. So we can quadruple our capacity by adding the trains and by increasing the frequency of service.
How many can fit on one married pair?
How many people on a married pair? Where's Kevin?
Each car.
Thanks for asking that, because I'm really excited, as Liz mentioned, about the level boarding on the cars, but we also made design changes on those vehicles based on your input. If you remember, when the mock-up was on the Old Town Square, we had about, between there and Union Station, we had about 12,000 people give us input. And we made significant changes, particularly for those who use wheelchairs. So I just wanted to highlight that for you as well. But in each car, there are 92 seats compared to light rail, which has 64. So a married pair would have 180, what's that? I'm not a school teacher. 184 seats. And then standing, it can accommodate a total, sitting and standing, of 240. But I will tell you, you don't want to be the 240th person. I would just wait for the next train.
Too tight a short.
So a married pair could carry a crush, what we call a crush load, 240 times to 480 people. So it's almost double what two light rail cars can carry.
Is that Bronco games?
People still want to go to the
Depends. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes.
Wadsworth for utilities or any other construction that closes out in Old Town?
Well, that are being street closures on Old Wadsworth. Is Bill Honer here? Bill Honer. He's here.
Are we done on closures? We got some more.
You go, Kevin. Kevin knows tricks.
For the commuter rail construction, there will be more closures of the streets that were closed before for utilities. All they did was redo the utilities on Old Wadsworth, Vance, Salisbury, all the streets. As we're going through putting in the track, you're seeing longer closures at Balsam and Carr. It's gone on already. Those same type of closures will have to happen with the rail coming through on Old Wadsworth, Vance, Salisbury. So you will see closures there. As far as closures during the construction of the garage, we're too early in the process to decide how they're going to be building the retaining walls. The buses are going to come off of Old Wadsworth and then parallel Old Wadsworth to get into the garage. And there's some pretty hefty retaining walls that are going to have to be built. We won't know until we get a little further in the design how that's going to affect the traffic on Old Wadsworth.
What's your name, Bill?
Bill, will you close Old Wadsworth and Vance at the same time? Or will there be any other streets that you close at the same time?
Unfortunately, yes. It's coming up pretty soon. Because of the difference in elevations that the tracks are going to be going in. If anybody's driven down Garrison, you know as you're driving south, you can't see somebody coming from the south because there is one heck of a hump. Adding 2 more tracks there on that hump was not feasible, and it didn't meet any sort of road design standards. So at Garrison, the commuter rail tracks are going to be about 2 feet, 2.5 feet lower than where the Burlington Northern track is now. So, obviously, Burlington Northern and Coors are not going to stop running trains for a couple weeks while construction's going on. So what's going to happen is that they're trying to get some of these streets done ahead of time. That's why they've done Carr. That's why they're doing Balsam. Allison is next. They're hoping to be done with Balsam probably about the 24th of this month. Immediately, as soon as that's open, they'll close Allison, start working on there, and then sometime in March, we're going to have Allison, Garrison, and Independence all closed at the same time. It's going to be a mess. Unfortunately, because of these elevations, they've got to get the westbound commuter rail track put into place, switch the Burlington Northern trains over to those tracks, and then they'll be able to rip out the Burlington Northern tracks. But they can't do that street by street because of the grades. So we don't have any real solution, except there'll be a lot of notice to everybody that this is coming up and that you're going to have to use alternative locations or routes to get to work.
Thanks, Bill.
Bill Hunters, our civil engineer, handling the civil side of construction on the gold line. This gentleman had a follow-up question.
First of all, I apologize, this is the first meeting I've been to, and I own the second floor of the building directly across the street from the walkway.
Okay.
And so, my first question was any thought given to, instead of putting the tracks on the north side of the railroad tracks, put them on the south side and eliminate the walkway? The flyover.
Long time ago, we looked at different routes as to whether the track should be north or south or that kind of thing. One of the things that drives the location of the tracks, obviously, is railroad right-of-way, where they'll allow us to be, and also where their service is, where they have little, what do they call them? Spurs, thank you, off to their service.
I'm talking about the 100 yards through Old Town.
Right, except that once we go on one side of the tracks, we pretty much have to stay on one side of the tracks, or you're going, they will not let us, railroads will not let us cross them at grade. So every time we cross them, we've got to build a flyover so that we're not crossing their tracks. So we can't switch back and forth, and ultimately, the decision was made that the north side is the best for the overall corridor.
My other question is for parking on the permitting. The three businesses below me, the Into the Fire and those guys down there, their employees, it is a constant hassle for their employees to find parking. And I would really like to see some kind of a permit that would give residents and employees a waiver on the 2-hour, because you're restricting parking more and more and more in that area. And I'd like to see a permit that would give these people some kind of a waiver on those 2-hour time slots and maybe just 3 permits per business or something like that.
Okay, something we can look into. I mean, I hear what you're saying, we've had that concern.
Well, I have them blocking my garage in the alley all the time because of no other parking possibilities. And it would be a simple little permit for, residents for overnight and employees for during the workday.
We have one back there.
Yeah, Karen?
Right back.
Yeah, Lyle, it's Karen. The reason that we wouldn't really want to do that is we want the street parking available for customers. And if we gave permits to employees, the streets would completely be filled with employees.
Well, you can tell them where to park. They work
Well, HODA has been working with the city on this issue, and in fact, we had a merchant meeting this morning where we kind of brainstormed how we're going to get through all this. We have told employees where to park. And we have identified some areas that we need to get back with the city, and they'll be coming to the HODA board and hopefully merchant meetings next month. ORA's involved, Denver Transit Partners, RTD, the city, so you got all these people that have to agree to things, but we came up with what we thought was some pretty good ideas.
And they wouldn't have to be on Grandview. They could be out back or even in that lot where there's now 4-hour parking. It's on the north side.
Yeah, but if you look at that, it's pretty well full, and that's supposed to be for the library, and I'm not speaking for them. But, I mean, we're working on that, and the reality is that it's just not going to be overly convenient for anybody for a while.
Yeah, we're looking at options.
But we want it to be most convenient for customers.
We are looking for options for the park. And on the track, too, the other issue that RTD wrestled with when they were looking at Gold Line, and there was supposed to be 2 tracks here, but I think Liz alluded to that. But as they started expanding that footprint of those 2 tracks, Liz said advances of 8%, it's closer to 12%, and it exceeds any kind of federal requirement or our requirement. So if they expanded that footprint for that track, then they were into vans, and then they'd have to chase that grade all the way down the hill to make it current standard. So there was just not enough room at the top.
I'm just talking about flipping signs. I mean, the track's exactly in the same location, just flip the signs.
Yeah, wasn't going to work.
It didn't, yeah, there was too many other obstacles in the way.
I hate to steer the conversation, but are there any other comments about the environmental reevaluation, the proposed changes, so we can get those right here?
Well, my simple question, what happens now to the original site on the east of that?
The original site on the east. The original site on the east, Kate, it's partially purchased with Federal Transit Administration monies, and so we have to work with the Federal Transit Administration about what we can do with that. So we don't know yet, is the best answer I have for you right now.
To be determined.
TBD. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Could you put up the slide that's got where you're going to put the parking deck now?
Sure. That's there.
Go back.
Do you want to go back one, please? There. Between the movie theater and the railroad alignment.
As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking back that in the early to mid-90s, Front Range was going to put in a campus where that theater is now, and they were going to put in parking decks. A parking deck. I'm wondering if anybody in City Hall was there any sort of evaluation done at that time, an EIS done at that time for that parking deck so that these folks don't have to reinvent the wheel?
There's no federal money.
Yeah, they believe they did soils back then, but there was no federal money involved.
Yeah, two problems with that. One is if a project is done without federal money, they don't have to do an EIS, so they probably didn't. And the other problem was that was so long ago, our federal transit agency would say that's old information, you've got to look at it anyway. So it's not going to be a huge reinventing the wheel, but it's going to be somewhat reinventing the wheel. Yeah.
I have a couple of, my questions are twofold. First of all, how many parking places are proposed in the parking structure right now?
There's 600,
More than 650.
650, and 400 are for transit.
Oh, 400 are for transit.
Yes.
So 250 are under the jurisdiction of, in some kind of a partnership with the city of Arvada then, as far as their use, and
Those will be city parking
Yeah,
spaces.
they're open for parking.
Right.
okay, so the city can determine at some point what their parking plan is for those 200 within the structure.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then secondly, you can answer both maybe. What's the financial participation on the city's behalf for this proposal?
Well, right now we're looking at about $13 million on our side.
$13 million is the city's responsibility?
Correct.
And what's the total cost of it?
20.
What was the total cost of the proposed 2030 parking garage?
I don't think we have an
I don't
estimate
think we
for
got
that
it
one.
that far.
Yep.
Yes, I'm curious about the historical survey and the participation of History Colorado.
Yes.
Could you please give us a better sense of what their role will be in that process? And does that fall within Section 106 of the National Historic Act?
Thank you. The short answer is yes, it does fall within Section 106 of the National Historic Act. And yes, we will be working with the State Historic Preservation Officer, or SHPO. What will happen is once we do some of our cultural surveys and our visual analysis, the Federal Transit Administration will write to the State Historic Preservation Officer and will write to other interested historic parties that have been participating along the Gold Line, and we'll say, we're considering this change. This is what we think the effects are. What do you think? And then there will be 30-day comment period for the State Historic Preservation Officer and local historic societies and cities to make their comments about whether they agree or disagree with our analysis. So yes, it absolutely falls under Section 106 and will follow Section 106.
And that process begins when you have the draft, or does it begin with the final report?
No, it's going to begin once we have the analysis done, because there's really nothing we can show anyone right now about the visual effects or those kind of things. So once we have the analysis done, we'll put the analysis out there for comment. We won't have a final environmental document until we've concluded the 106 process.
Okay, so when you talk about a draft report for people to look at and comment on,
Yes.
is that the same as your analysis?
Yes, that will include our analysis. Typically, when we write, or when the Federal Transit Administration writes to the State Historic Preservation Office, we kind of do an executive summary for them, but they also look at the document. And all the information that we generate to do the analysis will be in the document as well. It'll also be in the letter that we sent. So we'll be totally transparent about that. You can see anything you like that we generate for that analysis. You're welcome. Yeah.
This is a kind of a follow-up question to that question. So will those documents include the, I assume they're more design, developer-generated design documents about the design for the bridge, the design for the building. I know I've seen things that are out there already, and I was expecting that tonight, because this was initially billed as another developer-led meeting where we had seen some of the initial concepts for what things would look like. I was expecting to see more of those things tonight.
That will happen in the second half of the meeting.
Okay.
I'm just the NEPA geek.
Okay,
So I'm just talking to you about what we're doing for the environmental evaluation. And then when we're done with Q&A, then the developer will show you those things and talk to you about those things. You know, it's going to be, when we do our visual analysis for the environmental evaluation, it's going to be a combination of design drawings. We're going to have design drawings that we generated, because we have final design for the canopy and platform, and we know what the train's going to look like, so we're going to have our drawings in there, and then we're going to have some of their drawings, the developer's drawings in there to show what's proposed for the parking structure. So it's going to be different groups' design drawings that are all going to feed into that analysis, because we have to look at everything. Yeah.
How are the buses going to get in and out?
How are the buses going to get it in and out? It's proposed, I think on the next one, if you see Old Wadsworth, there's going to be a parallel roadway, that blue line, that goes up Old Wadsworth, circulates into the parking structure. There'll be bus bays in there, and you can see those. Little jagged lines are bus bays. And then there'll be the elevator over there. And then the buses will exit on Vance right out.
Every bus will follow the same route.
Every bus
They
will,
come from the north, the south, the east.
well, every bus will follow the same route into and out of the parking structure. Some may use 56th Avenue, some may use 53rd, depending on whether they're going north and south. We'd like to split them up a little bit so they're not all on the same road. But we'll develop those plans for their exiting in other places. But that's how they're going to circulate in the structure. Yeah.
Along that same line, where will taxis and service vans, things like that, shuttle buses?
Taxis, shuttle buses, service vans. I don't know where they'll be. Have you made a plan for taxis, shuttle buses, service? We have to talk to our service planning department. One of the things I know that we impose to them is we understand that there's school buses that stop on Old Wadsworth, drop kids off to go to the museum, etc. We're talking to our service planning about, can we have those school buses go into the bus facility and use that for that kind of circulation? So that conversation is just starting. At Denver Union Station, we share our bus facility with other providers. I don't see, I'm speaking for our service planners, and I might get whacked when I go home, but I don't see why we, couldn't consider the same thing here, to use a bus facility for special uses as well. This would be hard to drop people off on Vance or Wadsworth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just kind of curious, how far east and west of Old Arvada are people here going to be alerted to the fact that there's a train coming? I mean, you've got all these silent crossings.
Right.
It's kind of important to know a train's coming.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
How far do those go eastbound and westbound before we can hear the train coming?
Before you can hear the train coming?
Yeah.
Well, the gate arms are going to come down ahead of the train, and there's going to be bells on the gate arms to alert that there's a train coming. And so people won't be able to cross the tracks unless they run right through those gates. There'll also be fences along the alignment, so people can't just, accidentally jump over there. They gotta climb over a fence. I can tell you on some of our properties, sometimes people get hurt and they climb over fences, etc. It's sort of that trade-off between how much can you protect the public and how much do you want it to be a little quieter out there and safer, actually, with our crossings. So it's a trade-off.
Second question, the pedestrian bridge, I know they built the one down by the Pepsi Center. They have to be a certain height, they're pretty high.
Correct.
Right?
Has to be 30 feet high in this circumstance because we have electric wires that it has to be over with a certain
Okay.
separation.
You have all steps going up on both sides.
Yes?
Right. Are there elevators on
Yes.
the side? How's the handicap?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there are elevators. Yeah.
In this comment period, are we going to be commenting on the proposal, the ER, to a degree that the design will be done to a schematic level? Let's say that they will actually be able to comment on how it circulates, how the entries and exits are, and so forth. Is that going to be done to that level at this point?
It will be done to the 30% design level, and that's the design level that we go to during the environmental impact statement process. And that's sometimes why things change, because then we take the design further and go, oh goodness, we're going to have to do this or that, and we have to do more environmental reevaluation as the design progresses. But it will be done to the same level that we did during the EIS process. Karen?
Do you have a picture of the electric train and what the wires are going to look like?
On the website?
On the website we do, and we will have it in the document, in the reevaluation document, because it'll be part of the visual simulation. We'll have the train there, the wires, the whole thing, so you can see it.
We're going to put this on the website probably tomorrow, maybe by Thursday, and I'll include a picture of the train.
Okay, we're going to put the presentation on the website tomorrow, and so Kevin said he would include a picture of the train in that, but it'll be in our visual simulation as well, so you can see what it looks like. So we have a pretty good idea now, because they're building them in Philadelphia, which is exciting. Other questions or comments? Yeah.
You have a wonderful south-facing aspect there. What provision do you have for being able to add solar panels at some point in the future?
I'm going to let the designers talk about their plans for that, because we're not developing those plans. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? We can go to the second half where we can look at more of what's happened with the design. Okay. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm gonna stand down here. We're gonna change from the NEPA geek to the real estate geek, I guess. So how many have been to one of these meetings, and who was in this room in November? So about half. So I'm gonna try and go through some of this fairly quickly, and we can go back to anything that you want to ask questions about, because some of this is gonna be a duplication of what Liz talked about. And some of it will be more detail that you've asked about. So what I'm going to do, if we go to the next slide, is first of all give you a quick bit of history. Back in the spring of last year, the City of Arvada, the Arvada Urban Renewal Authority, and RTD put out an RFP for a developer. And the developer was to propose ideas for the 9-acre site along Wadsworth. And when we got involved, this was kind of the plan. Which you've seen, the yellow on the top is where the train platform was going to be. On the south side of the tracks, there was going to be an at-grade bus facility at the Tiller lot, and then there was going to be an RTD parking garage if we went with the 2030 parking option on the 9-acre site between Vance and Wadsworth. So that's what our understanding is as we got involved. So the next slide talks about two options that we submitted when we submitted to the city. You know what, I need to back up a second. I'm Bill Mosier. I'm with Trammell Crow. I run the Trammell Crow office here in Colorado, and I apologize, I was all ginned up. And I know it's already like 7 o'clock, so I was trying to move you all along, so I was jumping right into it. But anyway, I'm Bill. So we came up with two different options. Option A, which really recognized that the parking would be on the 9-acre site, what we call the 9-acre site, bounded by kind of 53rd, 4th, 5th, whatever that boundary is, because there's no street there, Wadsworth and Vance up to the hill. Our proposal here was to move the parking garage up against Wadsworth and and not have people driving in through the site and just park on Wadsworth. Now the problem is, if you're going to do that, you obviously have to have an elevator that takes you up to Grandview, and then you got to walk 2 blocks to get to the train and still figure out how to cross the tracks and do all of that. So it was problematic for RTD in some ways, but that was the proposal that we submitted. And then, as you note here, we provided the 400 cars. The bus facility would be on the current tiller lot. We had residential, and we had a request from the city to look at a hotel, which we're still doing, looking at a hotel there, and then some retail, particularly along Wadsworth. So that was our option A. Option B was an idea that our designers, R&L, and us concocted, and that was, if the bus facility is going to be over on the tiller lot, what if we moved the 400 parking spaces and put it under the bus facility and built it into the slope of the hill and had it be on the west side of Vance rather than the east side of Vance? So that big gray area is on the south side of the tracks, on the tiller lot, where the bus facility was, and that actually is the footprint, roughly, of where that bus facility was going to be. And then we were going to dig out that slope and put the parking down below. And then that cleared up the 9 acres, as you see here, for housing, retail, and possibly a hotel. So that's what we submitted. We ended up getting selected, and if we can go to the next one, Tony. We committed then to do a couple things, which the next 2 slides are going to talk about. One is a community outreach plan, which this is part of. This is, I think, around the 12th meeting. And I noticed our goal line committee wasn't on here, so we'll add that. So we get a goal line committee on there. But we were here in this meeting last November. We've appeared before City Council, before the RTD board, talking about all this, and we will continue to do this throughout this process. You'll have my word that we'll continue to do that. And you've got the Notify Me system and the Arvada report, and so we're well into this now, and we're feeling pretty comfortable, and if you have issues, please let us know, because we can refine that. So the next thing we committed to was kind of how we were moving forward. And you can see here from the schedule, back in the spring, as I mentioned, all this RFP, RFQ process was going on. We got selected essentially in July when we executed a negotiating agreement with the city and the Urban Renewal Authority. We then had a goal of January 24th to complete schematic design of this transit element, and that's the 30% that Liz was talking about, and we made that goal. And that's where we are today. So by March, we want to execute all the agreements that will allow this to proceed. We will then complete all of the site planning, rezoning, FDPs, TDPs, PRQs, everything else that we have to do. DRC is the Design Review Committee. We've been to that body twice so far, so we'll go through all that. And our hope is to finalize that sometime in May. And that would set us up for a June, or call it this summer, start of construction. We think this will take a little bit more than a year. Our goal is really to finish this before the end of 2015 so that it's completely ready and hopefully operating even before the train stops in March, so that we're all used to how the bus is operating and such. So from here on, I'm going to bring you up to speed with what we've been doing. And so some of this will be new for some of you. And a little more advanced in the design. One thing that we did, there's two major changes that happened. One is the city said, let's go beyond 400 spaces. Can we add spaces to support Old Town? A lot of the conversation you all have engaged in. So we had a goal of adding 200 spaces. Right now in our schematic design package, we've added 273 additional spaces, so 673. We're using 650 as kind of the number because every time you design a parking garage, the number of spaces change. But we'll be somewhere in the 670 range. 400 for RTD, which will be available in the nights and weekends for others. And then the 270 city spaces. And so it'll be operated and owned as a city parking garage. And that process can change over time. The city can adapt how the parking garage is used over time as the demand increases. So by doing that, we ended up making it a little bit wider garage. We didn't go, we went one level deeper, but it became a little bit wider to accommodate that. So that's really in the footprint that you see here. The second thing that we did, which I think was a really good change overall, which we talked about in November, is instead of the buses being in the top and everybody on Grandview looking at the buses and people being out in the open air, we put the buses all the way at the bottom. And that also helped us structurally because we put the heavy load at the bottom of the garage on grade at the same level as the Landmark Theater, and then we built the parking garage up above. And what that did is kind of lower the profile even from Grandview, and there's a model you all should look at afterwards if you want to take a look at how that works. What that also did is it actually allowed the turning movements for the buses to be separate from the cars. So now instead of buses trying to go up Old Wads and turn right, which actually didn't work very well, and then turn right down a hill on Vance, we cleared out that place to the left so that you stay on grade and the buses pull off at grade down below the hill, and they go right into the first level of the garage. The cars keep going up the hill and they turn right where that red line is into a middle level of the garage. So you're actually turning into the middle, and then you can go down or you can go up. And then the buses come out on Vance, and the good part about that is they come out at grade, not going downhill, and they stop at Vance. And they're basically at 56th. And so RTD has some good routing, and we can control that intersection, and you don't have buses coming right into Vance right in the middle of the block. So we thought those were good changes overall. The development on the right, we're going to start talking about zoning here in a minute. This got a little complicated doing all this. So what we decided to do is do west of Vance and do east of Vance. So this is kind of a west of Vance discussion, and we'll talk about the zoning for that. Then we're going to come back to you in a May-June timeframe when all this kind of gets put to bed. Then we will come back and run through this same kind of a process with you on what happens between Vance and Wadsworth on zoning and that sort of thing. So there will be plenty of opportunities to discuss what happens on the 9-acre site. We have not advanced the 9-acre site whatsoever other than respond to retailers calling us interested in being on Wadsworth. Next slide. Oh, let's go back one slide if we could. Well, that's all right. We'll show it better in another slide, so go for it. Okay, so I'm going to go through these really close quickly because you all were welcome to talk about this, but this is level 1. This is a lot of detail, but this is at-grade, landmark, undercover bus facility. And so the buses all route through here. And there is some parking access so people can ramp and park. And we actually have the ability, if we want, to have parking come right off of the landmark lot later on in the future if we wish to do that. Next slide just shows stacking. So at the bottom, on up to the top to where you have the top level is the one basically at the tiller lot behind the flour mill. Now, I didn't start out by saying, I met with the Historical Society a few weeks ago, and I started out by saying, before I even said my name, I said the flour mill is staying where it is, and so is the pavilion. I should have started this meeting out the same way, for Mark Devon's sake. But the flour mill is north of this garage, so this is actually south of the tracks. So the top level becomes the top deck, roughly at the tiller lot elevation. Okay, next slide. Now we've got some new things to show you, and our architects are here, and I'd be happy to bring them up during the question period if you've got questions about the design, particularly of the bridge. But what we've done and what they have done is studied bridges, studied the water tower, studied some of the metal work that's been done along the railroads and such in Arvada and in this part of Colorado, and taken some of their design clues from that, and we can come back to that if you have questions. Then what we also did was look at how special those views are from Grandview. So one of the reasons that the elevator and the bridge, thank you very much, are located where they are is to make sure that those views are maintained. So we have the views towards the water tower, we have the views to the front range and to downtown, and that gives you an idea that from the Transit Plaza, almost all the way to Vance, that those views remain unobstructed. So here's a couple of new renderings that we've done, and this first one is standing on Vance. You would be standing on the south part of Vance, looking to the northwest towards the mountains, towards the water tower on the left, and kind of halfway up the hill. And this looks at the garage. And one of the fun things that we think really helped us is that one of our clues to trying to connect to Old Town, because we want our development and the 9 acres and the new neighborhoods and new people and new retail that's south of Old Town to connect into Old Town. We were trying to figure out how do you deal with that hill, not just from a transit standpoint, but just to have people do business in Old Town. So you'll see in the lower left-hand corner this picture of plaza with trees and paving and that sort of thing. And we really view this as an entry from the south to Old Town Arvada. So you can go up the sidewalk that you see those people standing in the middle of the picture, and go up the hill on a sidewalk and go right up to Grandview that way. Or you can go directly into this pavilion here that has glass stairs, glass elevators, and takes you up to the bridge and crosses over. There's a lot of interest in views, and so we put that little platform, diving board or whatever you want to call it, on the south side, so that people can go out and look at the views. And it kind of sticks out over the plaza and provides great views of Denver and Front Range. You can see some red in there. We're putting most of the design along the Vance corner and along the Old Watts corner, and we're trying to put as much brick and some color and do it there, and not putting that same kind of effort into the area behind the Landmark Theater, because nobody's going to see it. But this area we want to be well lit, safe, attractive, open, and a plaza to connect to the south part of Arvada into Oakland. So we can come back to some of these views if you've got questions. You can start to see the view of the bridge, which again is open air, except in the portion that is over the tracks, and to a certain distance on the side of the track. By federal law, we have to have 8-foot high panels, and those are going to be glass so that people can still see through. But our experience has been that people want to be open air, they want to see, and they want it well lit. And so that will be the bridge, and we'll come back to the bridge in some more detail. Now this is, I'm going to take you around the parking area a little bit. This is the looking straight down, and so you can see the plaza in the lower right, which is at the lower part of Vance. That's even with the Landmark Theater. So you can walk from the Landmark parking lot right onto this, and then when you walk in, you can either get in stairs and elevators and go up to the bridge to cross over, or you walk in right into the bus facility. And the cool thing about the bus facility is there's no curb, you can take a wheelchair, you can walk, you just walk right from the plaza right onto the bus station, and it'll be undercover. So that'll be at that level, and then the bridge goes over, and then there's the train plaza, and on the left-hand side of that train plaza, you can see the platform for the train platform. And you will have crossed both of the tracks at that point. And you can see some ideas that we've got for vegetation, and those are all in design right now by RTD and others to design the vegetation. Next slide. So here's a view on Grandview, a kind of a night view, sunset view. And this is looking back at this would be standing on Grandview, looking west towards the mountains. And you can see straight over. In fact, the building that you see kind of underneath the bridge is actually the Landmark Theater building that you still see today. You can see some little light posts. There will be some light on top of the parking garage, so you'll see that. But this plaza will be along Grandview, and these elevators and stairs will be glass, so that people will be open and you'll be able to see through it and beyond. Another part of this project that we think is interesting, and I think will control the cost, is that we wanted to make this an open-air garage, give it natural ventilation so that we don't have to pay for a ventilation system, and have it be more sustainable because we're not using electricity to get the bus fumes and all that sort of thing out of here, and some light. So we got this great slope. So as you can see here to the right of the parking garage, there's actually a cutback of the slope so that the parking garage is open air on all sides. And you'll have this very steep landscape slope that you see underneath the bridge here, and the next slide will give you a better view of that. So this is a cut section of the parking garage that you can see with the terrace of the existing hillside, which will be a little bit pushed back, but it'll still be at kind of the same slope it is today. And you can see in the two pictures down below, and particularly the one on the left, we think it's an opportunity to bring in some landscaping and provide some greenery so that when you're waiting for a bus, you actually have fresh air. You can see outside on both sides. And at every level of the parking garage, you'll look out and you'll see the landscape slope that you see today with some vegetation and some retaining walls. That will not be accessible to the public because it's too steep, so you won't be able to go back there and picnic, but it'll be there to enjoy. The other side of this is Old Wads, and we have paid a lot of attention to the corner of Old Wads where the flour mill is, and it's really important that this be a significant entry, if you will, to the parking garage. So I don't know what meeting we were at. I think it was actually a public meeting, it might have been a city council meeting, but somebody said, is there access to the top of the deck for events and such? Because the deck is going to be at the tiller lot level and it'll be right behind the flour mill. So we thought, well, that's an interesting idea. So one of the new designs that we've not shown before, so this is new, is we have figured out generally a way, we haven't engineered it all yet, but we figured out a way that you can have a ramp going up from Old Wads to the top deck so that you could bring tables and chairs. You could have special trucks that come up and unload things and then leave again. You could put food trucks up there, and this would have bollards in front of it, so you'd have to get a city permit or something to do this. You can't just drive in. But the top deck could be closed off, and trucks could access the top, and you could have craft shows, food marts, farmers markets, and the top deck would be open to the air and be available for events, and the city could close that off for parking, particularly in the evening and weekends. And so that's what this ramp is here, and then there's a ramp so you come down from the parking, handicap ramp, so you can come right down to the corner of Old Wads and the flour mill. There's some steps right behind that ramp, and so we really view this as great additional parking for the flour mill right behind there. And then you can see this opening now. Right now there's a little garden they have back there, and so that can stay or go. I mean, this whole area can be kind of redesigned and be part of what's happening with the flour mill and the pavilion behind, and you can see a view of the bridge. So that's a new concept. The other thing that this did is it actually cut the part of the parking garage. We lost some spaces, but it brought the parking garage a little bit south, so you see the flour mill sooner as you're going up Old Wads. Next slide. Now we're going to switch to the main part of this meeting and why we wanted to have this. I'm almost done, and you can ask all your questions, but we need to get into zoning issues. So this is interesting because the top area, which is the Old Town Grandview zone, is in red. So it's really everything. It's really everything north of the Landmark Theater property. So the middle piece where it says new area is actually in the Old Town Grandview zone today. So it is pink today. And all the pink stays. We're not messing with that. And the dotted red line that you see is where the transit plaza will be within this zoning boundary. And so that middle strip of land, kind of a beige-ish color, is what is being proposed to be rezoned from the Old Town Grandview to the PUD BPR that is the zoning for the landmark lot. So now we're just extending the landmark PUD zoning up the hill, essentially, and creating a new, creating that as part of the landmark zone district and not part of the Grandview zone district, which is planned unit development. And there's some requirements there. So that new area becomes the transit center and the parking garage. Next slide. There's two issues that we'll be asking City Council for a modification of and that we're bringing to you tonight. I'm going to have to stand up here and over here because I can't read it otherwise. There's two issues. One is, and in this area we're talking about where the bridge lands on Grandview on the north side. So this is the north bridge issue. There's a south bridge issue and a north bridge issue. This is the north bridge issue. As Liz mentioned, there's 30-foot clearance that we have to have above the tracks. Actually, RTDs and DTC are asking for a little more. We're hoping we can stick with the 30 feet. That means that the very top of the elevator stair tower is about 44.5 feet. The current zoning is 20 feet. So we're asking in this one little area for there to be a modification or variance allowed. It would not allow for 40-foot towers anywhere else other than here. The other thing is that we have a grand view requirement for a setback of 50 feet. And in this case, the tower is only 15 feet from Grandview. And so again, in this little location, it doesn't affect any property anywhere else, asking for that setback to be modified. Then the next slide talks about how the PUD needs to be modified, that where landmarks is, and pretty much the same two issues. The height limit in the PUD is 35 feet. Our parking garage actually fits in the current height limit. The height of the parking garage is 35 feet from the landmark property. The tower, however, is 90.5 feet from the bottom of the landmark property to the top of the elevator tower and to the top of the structure. Then we have coverage issues. The setbacks are roughly 20 feet on the front and 10 feet on the side, and we're looking, the sides are actually the railroad tracks and the landmark, and so we're building right up to the property lines in those locations. And then in the frontage is really considered to be the east and the west side, so Vance and Old Watts, and looking for a 5-foot setback to accommodate the garage and the transit center fitting in that location. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions, comments, and we can go back to any slides. I know you've heard a lot about this project from 2 different people, so I know some of what I had to say was redundant, but hopefully that explains where we're at and what the process is going forward. And be happy to take any questions or comments. Yes, sir.
The top level of parking, is that access through the structure, or is that
Yes.
some old Wadsworth?
You access it from inside the structure, so you turn in kind of to the middle of the garage, and to get to the top deck, you just go up one ramp to the top. And then that area with the bollards and the ramps that I showed, you can go back to that, Tony. We're probably going to be skipping back and forth here a little bit, but if you go back to that area right there would have to be a special permit from the city to be able to drive from Old Watts right to the top of the deck.
Sometimes that way have cars parked on there that came up through.
Yes, yes.
So pedestrian access is fairly easy from this side of the structure to get to Old Town?
Oh yeah, you just walk down that ramp or those stairs and you're right there at on Old Watts.
But if you're on the lower levels,
There's
stairways to get up on this side, not having to go over the bridge.
There's 3 sets of stairs, west, central, and east, and then there's elevators at the bridge, and you can get off at any level and then walk across and come right here. So this, if you're going to Udi's, you would, or you're going to the Flour Mill, you would park here. Or a vat of beer, yeah, if you want a beer, you would park here. Yeah.
Your slide showed the bridge location much closer to Webster than it is to Vance, which was in the other set of slides.
No, we're at Vance.
You're at Vance?
Yes. Yeah, we're west of Vance, same location.
So right along the edge of Vance?
Yep. Yes, sir. Did you,
Oh, yeah. I'm just wondering where the tracks were.
The tracks are on the other side of the flour mill. So the tracks are on the left side of this picture on the flour mill. So north of the flour mill. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, 2 years ago, we got 50 to 60 signatures from the residential Old Town historic area to preserve the view to the west from that area. It doesn't look like it's preserved.
Yeah, that's the blue.
It looks like it's modern glass.
No, this is the view here.
But, no, I'm talking
But
about
if you're at Vance, yeah, from Vance, then you're looking, let's go to that perspective you showed Tony, the other one. So if you're Grandview at Wadsworth, if you're on Grandview at Wadsworth, you'd be looking. No, but if you're at Wadsworth and Grandview, you'd be looking through this way. This would be your view. If you're looking at Vance, if you're at Vance and Grandview, this is kind of where this picture's taken, but anything east of Vance is this view.
So you still see the entire mountain range,
Oh, yeah.
including mountains?
Well, the good thing is that we're having to move this thing up 30 feet, which is bad from a cost standpoint, but it's good because now we're framing the view. You're probably going to be able to see under the bridge and see the mountains. As this rendering shows, I assume, Brian, this is an accurate, of course it is an accurate. It's an accurate depiction. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the entry to the parking structure. You mentioned that the buses will come in at grade, so they won't be going up the hill, which is fantastic. Is there any, it sounds like though that the cars will be entering by going up the hill?
They will go halfway up the hill.
Halfway up the hill, fantastic. So the question is, that's a one-lane or two-lane road, one lane each way. When the train comes through, that traffic backs up to 56th. Is there any plans to put in a turn lane so that those who are trying to get to the trains aren't stuck waiting on the trains to cross?
I don't think we have room for a turn lane, do we? Maybe, okay. We'll look at a turn lane. I don't think we've looked at a turn lane, but we can look and see if we have the width for a turn lane.
Because it certainly,
But you're right,
when
it
the
will-
trains come,
it
so I
will
can
back
see
up.
people being very frustrated in their cars trying to get in to get the train
Right.
and watch the train go by.
There might be a little room to do a little right turn lane apparently, so we'll look into that. Yes, sir, and then I'll come over to you, sir.
Okay, so the cars that come in on the west side, go halfway up the hill, is there also car entrance on the east side coming in off of?
Yes, you can enter this garage left, right, east, west.
Okay.
Whereas the buses can only come in on Old Rods and only leave on Vance. I was going to call on this gentleman.
Okay, it looks as if you've got all this set up for traffic that's on Old Wadsworth going north
Or south.
or south. So how would that traffic pattern be?
Oh, you can't be going south and turn into the garage, can you? Yeah.
We can't have
can't.
cars making a
Right.
left
You're
turn
right, I forgot
right
about
after the tracks. Because if they're coming down and they want to make a left turn and there's cars trying to go northbound and the gates start coming down, they're going to get trapped.
So they have to go down.
So even before any of this was thought of, the way Old Wadsworth was going to be set up was there was going to be an island blocking the left turn into the Flour Mill lot. Because it wasn't practical the way it was, because of how close it is to the crossing. So we can't have southbound Old Wadsworth traffic turning into the parking garage. What they're going to have to do is turn onto Grandview and then turn onto Vance and then come in from that way. You'll have the ability to make the right turn in northbound and to come out and go northbound. You'll have full access on Vance. But because of the closeness of the tracks and the fear that somebody could get trapped between the gates, we can't have left turns.
So is there some way to encourage people to come in from the east side? Because if they're coming, Grandview and Old Wadsworth is already a mess. And if we're gonna have that much more traffic coming through there, it's gonna even be worse.
There'll have to be signage to people. I mean, I'll pick on my wife.
No,
Sorry,
I understand there's gotta be somewhere because.
But she always, she picks me up at City Hall, we're going down to Home Depot. She usually makes a left turn and goes down to Wadsworth. I myself, I go out to Wadsworth Bypass because it's a little faster, you don't have to go through the narrow street, blah, 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 blah. And people will learn those traffic patterns as they get used to it. And there'll be signage too.
Okay, we had, yes, ma'am. The bridge is 12 feet wide. Yes, sir.
I hope this isn't too ignorant a question. Did you consider there's a slope there? Did you ever consider building a tunnel going underneath? Yes.
A tunnel for, instead of the bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah, and as Liz talked about, the expense of going underneath the railroad tracks and coming back up. Also, for the most part, people hate tunnels. I mean, they don't.
Well, I know we're getting an increased homeless population, it's a place for them to live.
Right.
The bridge is an eyesore. I think it distracts from the look. You already got these square bases over here on the bridge that, you know, kind of looks like, I'm not sure, it's like Oriental.
Okay, just a second, sir. I've got this lady back here. Yes?
I have a two-part question. One, is there any accommodation being made for people who are just being dropped off and picked up
Yes?
rather than parked? And what about accommodation for people who are riding their bike in terms of traffic flow and parking their bikes? and that sort of thing?
I'll take the second one first. In terms of bikes, the garage and the elevators are being designed to accommodate bikes. RTD accommodates bikes on their bus and they accommodate bikes on the train. So, and what we haven't talked about, which we can easily do, which we've done in other garages, is have bike parking in the garage so that people have a place to lock up a bike. And we ought to do that if we haven't done it already, have we? We have. Okay.
So is there a place where if you just drop someone off?
And then if you're dropping someone off, you can drop them off on 56th and Vance at the corner. You could drive into the Landmark lot and drop them off there, or of course you can drop them off on Grandview. Yes, sir.
Is that access bridge going to be the tallest building in Arvada?
Depends on which side of the street you're on. On the Grandview side, not, and on the south side at 56th, probably. I don't know, how tall is the water tower, though?
There's an Arvada house.
Arvada house? How tall is Arvada house? I don't know. 6 stories. 6 stories? Oh, well, the Arvada house will probably still be the tallest structure.
The water tower is 157.
And the water tower will be the highest structure. Yes?
You said you're asking for variances to all those zones. Are you asking the city?
Yes. City council needs to approve it. And there's the frontage and the height, setbacks and height, just on the garage portion. It doesn't affect anybody else's property, so this doesn't mean that I can go across the street and build to 95 feet or do 0 setbacks without dealing with the city on it. This is only for these specific points within the plan. So it's these towers in these locations.
I'm all for fast track. I'm just not sure that it fits with the Main Street Americana.
Okay? Yes, sir.
Try again. Okay,
Ma'am. Sorry. Light.
I know uniforms was there, but, you go back. All right, my question's about the glass that you have in the tunnel, or the walkway.
On the walkway?
Yeah, I don't know if you touched into it, but what about those people that are handicapped and scared of heights?
Well, there's rails. There have to be rails. We can't have people just falling off the sides, kids and stuff, so.
It's the visual appearance
Right.
of 9 stories looking down, but
Yeah.
90 feet is going to equal.
Right.
And-
Well, we've talked about whether, first of all, you don't have to go out there, because the good thing is that's not where the elevator gets off. That was viewed as a place for people to go check things out. So it's more of an amenity or a tourist thing or something like that. So, but the crossover to the train is glass, but it's enclosed. I mean, it's hard surface. You're not going to fall through. But if somebody's afraid of heights, they'll walk in the middle, I guess.
No, they won't, they hold on.
Or they hold on to the rail.
Go to
Or you have so there will be rails that people can hold on to. You can always cross at grade. You can wait for the freight train to go by, and you can cross at grade at Old Watts and Advance. There's still, there's,
Have like someone in a wheelchair?
right. No, you're right. That's why the bridge is great, because it's great for handicap access.
But they could park on the west side of the upper deck and use that ramp that they showed going to the flour mill. And it is a grade, a level, pretty level grade crossing there. And then off the west end of the station platform, RTD is running a sidewalk right to Old Wadsworth. So you can cross over the tracks, make an immediate right, and walk right into the station. So, and
you have a choice.
I've got the same problem she does. I am deathly scared of heights.
I'm not scared of heights, but I know that people are.
Yeah, and it's a struggle. I'll tell you, I have a real problem walking across a high bridge. And it goes way back to my childhood.
Okay, back.
So this is kind of a process question the height of the bridge, and if you take a look right now at the skyline, so to speak, as you look at Arvada, and you think about the impact of the 40-plus foot bridge on one side and the 5-story apartment building that's planned right on the between the Stockton Walter Historic District and Old Town Historic District, why the skyline for Arvada is going to change significantly. My process question is, as RTD does its study about the aesthetics and the historical aspects and changes to Old Town, if they end up determining through their 106 process that there is an impact on those two aspects of Arvada that's negative, how does that impact your design, and what's the process then for resolving those issues?
Well, what my understanding is this will go to the State Historic Preservation Officer for review. And so that either resolves or doesn't resolve. Obviously, one of the solutions is not to have the bridge. And people walk up the hill and wait for the freight trains or whatever to cross and cross it grade. Or go to a tunnel if that can be afforded. So, yes, ma'am.
I want to know who this state historical.
It's through the History Colorado Center.
What?
History Colorado Center. They serve as the state historic.
They don't really care about Arvada. Those people down there. I'm from Arvada Historical Society, and I kind of know that we don't get that much input from them.
Yeah, well, the federal government relies on each state to have a state historic preservation office, and in Colorado, that's the History Colorado.
But you also get to make comments during the process. When I said other local governments and other historic societies that have been on our, what's called the consulting parties list throughout the EIS process, everyone gets to make comments, not just the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Officer. You'll all get the information about our visual sims and be able to make your comments. You will. We'll get it to you.
Yes, sir.
Is it the FRA or the BN, are you waiting toward the final approval of the height of the bridge over their actual way?
I think when do we get 30 feet to sidewalk?
It's actually requirements of DTP, which is Denver Transit Partners. There are requirements for the railroad. What they're worried about is that their trains can get under it. With this is a commuter rail, it's electrified units, so there's a catenary, the wires, similar to the light rail that you see in downtown Denver. There's a system of wires going across. So DTP is going to operate this for 32 years, 30 years after they build it. They're going to operate it. And so their people doing risk analysis, whatever else, have set the height limitation above the catenary. That's what they're worried about. Get above that wire.
Yeah, I'm talking about the freight transport.
Right.
Don't they have federal requirements on how?
Yeah, we're
much lower.
They're
than
lower.
the 30 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's 24 feet for those. 23.6. Okay.
23.6.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about number of parking spaces. Listening to an earlier presentation by Tony Thornton,
Right.
in addition to the 675, or whatever it is, spaces we're talking about now, the top deck will take an additional 223.
No, the 673 is the current count for the entire parking garage.
That includes the top deck?
That includes the top deck.
Okay, so there's no room for future expansion?
The only way you could expand is to build it south into the landmark theater. That's a big garage, going bigger. Yes, sir.
I would imagine a traffic study has been done on this. I'm just wondering where the anticipated traffic is coming from using these 650 spaces. And if you could share that with me.
Want me to take that on?
Sure.
Yeah. So the traffic study.
This is Tony Thornton with RNL, who's our design architect.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for this session. Traffic study is underway. We've had some preliminary counts. The good news is that the traffic count in this area at peak times is not expected to be greatly impacted even with a garage of this magnitude. And that's when you look at the number of trips and cars that access the streets over a period of time. Vance will be more used than Old Wadsworth, as it is currently, and it will stay that way. One of the studies that they do is to look at the number of car increases in any set period to see if it warrants additional signalization or something like that becomes a requirement. And even with the parking garage at its elevated counts, there's not a street warrant requirement for additional signalization. We may look at doing one for safety, but the good news is that traffic impacts are not expected to be increased greatly over what you've experienced today.
And remember today that this area here is where your parking right is and people are coming off of Wadsworth. So for the most part, I would expect most of this traffic to do the same thing. They're just going across the street. I mean, all those parking spaces for the most part are there today. Yes?
My last question to Liz was about that wonderful south-facing aspect. What kind of opportunities and obstacles are there to being able to harvest some solar energy?
We have looked at a variety of alternatives. One is to put solar on top of the top deck, and we ruled that out because of views. That'll block views, and we don't want to do that. So the other alternative is obviously the south-facing, and so maybe the upper half of the south-facing wall could support solar panels in the future. It kind of depends on what happens to the development south of it. Right now, the Landmark Theater would block a good part of the sun from that. But what we're looking at designing is making sure that we have the structural capacity and the chases to accommodate solar panels on that south wall at some future date. I don't think that's a big deal, and we're looking into it. We just designed we built a garage downtown Denver that accommodates solar on top, should it ever be decided to do that, and we've got all the chases that run down, so there's room to run conduit and power going down there. We are looking at the top deck of this garage of having extra lighting and extra power, so if there are events that you've got something to plug into and use for lighting at night or tents or whatever, go up there for events. Yes, sir.
This might be more for the city. I don't know if you'd be involved because it's kind of an icing feature. But since the bridge is what I think is a decent compromise, and people from the parking structure have to use it to go to to get on the train, and people have to commute to the parking garage. To actually use that bridge as a source of putting up, like Grandview has right now for the historic views of, like you have that deck where you can see Inspiration Point on the side, everything to the east and south, and then
Right.
the other side. Is that a developer side? Is that a city add-on later?
What, to do it on the north?
Yeah, do the informative panoramic, this is what you're looking at.
On the north side? On the
On the bridge.
Oh, on the bridge.
On the
We
bridge,
are,
you're up above.
right, we are talking about doing it, and we're actually talking about taking some of the pieces that are on Vance and putting them up there and doing a display. I mean, we could have informative information up there. We definitely are planning on it. Yeah, no, it's a good idea. I mean, it could be a public art project or, it's any number of things. As we get into the design of it, we can consider those sorts of things. The idea was to take advantage of that. It's kind of a unique, it would be a very unique experience and view. And so how do you take advantage of that? Anything else? Yes, sir.
I'm still a little bit bothered by accessing this whole thing. And this is probably going to be a real loaded question, because I was going to ask you, have you done a traffic study related to my question? And you really can't, because there's no traffic there yet. But since all traffic has to come from the south in order to enter the parking deck.
No, they can come south on Wadsworth and they can come south on Vance.
Okay, if I'm going south, so on Wadsworth itself, so you've looked at that, there's not going to be any hang-ups? Will traffic have to turn between the theater and where the Lowe's is?
If you're coming south on Wadsworth, you already turn into the parking right here, so you would turn 56 and you can take a right in Vance and go into the garage.
Well, I wish you put some of these, you got a very busy slide, maybe you need another 1 or 2 more slides showing potential routes in and out.
Well, that'll
routes
be-
that you've,
That'll be the result of a traffic study. A traffic study will have all those arrows. We'll send it to you.
But again, a traffic study for traffic that isn't here yet.
Oh, it's projected. Traffic studies project.
You're projecting.
Yeah. And you've already got the traffic there. I mean, these people are already coming to the park and ride, so it's not that hard to model what that is.
Could you put that circulation, that slide up that shows the circulation more? I think he's on
If you go back to the very beginning, Tony, this was a bus. This is how RTD was going to route its buses. So those were bus routings for the original plan to put the bus station at the tiller lot. Is that the slide you're referring to?
Yeah, but that's not really doing it.
That doesn't take care of your question.
What is it? Maybe one of the other plans? I'm just trying to find out. Do the cars come up from the northeast corner off Vance? Can they come into a certain level of the parking garage?
Yeah, they come into the middle level of the parking garage
Middle
off of
level.
Vance.
At that northeast.
Either
corner.
direct, you can come north or south on Vance and enter the middle level of the parking garage. For that matter, you can actually drive through the landmark site, and there's a potential to enter in at that grade too, should everybody want to do that later during the redevelopment of the landmark, if that were to ever happen. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
do you have a 4th level that
So
shows or second level?
here's that view. There's the potential to enter the garage from the landmark site, should you ever want to do that. And then this shows the entry off of Vance, left turn or right turn, and the entry at Old Watts. Into the middle level of the garage, so you're one level down, basically.
People may want to take a look at the model also.
Yeah,
Kind of the clue of where the entries are in relation to the 3rd and 4th level of the parking structure.
Yes, ma'am.
In the last meeting, you said you were in charge of parking, and so who's the...
No, there's no charge for the parking. No, there's never been a charge for parking.
I asked the question, you said yes, we charge.
No.
RTD has the ability to charge, as Liz talked about, if they have problems with parking and capacities, et cetera. They do have the right by legislative.
They can charge for out of
They can
district.
charge. They don't do it except for one.
Not generally, no.
Not generally, they don't. But in the future, they could possibly.
We've done it at Table Mesa because the students decide they want to park there and stay all summer because it's really good covered parking when they're on vacation. So if we have particular issues like that, then we look for areas like in Stapleton where people are gone multiple days at the airport, we do, but it's unusual.
I just want to clarify, we do charge for parking more than one day in many of our lots for people who take Skyride or leave their cars at our parking lots when they go to the airport. But we don't charge for day parking, for commuting. We charge on the second day if you leave your car there for more than one day. Out of district, thank you, Ray. Out of the district, we charge from the first day, $4. Because out of district residents, they don't pay a sales tax to support these facilities, so we charge them even if they commute. But for folks nobody here lives outside our district, do you? The RTD district is larger than the state of Rhode Island. But then again, what is it?
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. I don't want to keep you if you need to go anywhere. And there's also a model here to look at, but any final questions or comments?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.